Specific Mano Blue, that case is called El Caso de Nash. This guy calls in to the show claiming that he made a blood pact with La Santa Muerte because he wanted to get back together with his girlfriend.
Should have prayed before this, bro.
And that he's being haunted and possessed by a demonic entity. From the comments that I've seen and people who know more about La Santa Muerte, they say that that's not how that works. You can't really make a blood pact with La Santa Muerte. Maybe he made a blood pact with a demonic spirit, because that's what demonic spirits do. They try to trick you into thinking they're somebody else, meanwhile they're not who they say they are. Not long after he made the blood pact, his girlfriend ended up dying, and he didn't know why, and weird shit started happening to him after this whole thing. So he says that he feels like something is inside of him possessing him. His tone of voice changes and he starts speaking in tongue.
That's a sign, bro.
And he says that his abdomen swells up and like he feels like something's moving,
like in the Alien movies.
Exactly like that. And then while he's talking to a priest in that specific call, he ends up getting possessed. There's 3 calls in this whole thing, bro, and you can hear vividly
the demonic voice.
Yeah, bro. I'm telling you right now, it's fucking scary.
Ayúdenme, por favor, ayúdenme.
Hecho Nash, entonces repite, renuncio en el nombre de Jesús, a todo demonio de la Santa Muerte. En el nombre de Jesús, rompo todo pacto.
This is the most haunted Walmart in America. It's in Galveston, Texas, and it was actually built on the site of the former St. Mary's Orphan Asylum, which was destroyed in the hurricane of 1900. There's actually a historical marker right near the Walmart that describes the story of this place. When the storm hit Galveston in 1900, the nuns attempted to save as many kids as possible, tied the children's wrists together with clothesline, and then tied the clothesline around the waists of the nuns. However, the hurricane hit harder than expected, and when people looked through the ruins of the orphanage afterwards, they found the bodies of all the children tied together, drowned, tied up to the nuns. Since this Walmart was built near the site of the original orphan asylum, many workers have claimed to have experienced paranormal activity inside. An employee at one point heard a girl crying for help, but when he looked for her, he couldn't find her. People have also reported seeing toys move by themselves in these aisles, and heard disembodied laughter. What do you think? Would you shop at this Walmart, or is it too spooky?
19-year-old Angelo Hayes probably went through the most remarkable situation ever. He was riding his motorcycle in 1937 when he suddenly got into a bad crash and was thrown headfirst into a brick wall. And he was believed to be dead. They then buried him, and soon after, a suspicious insurance agent came to inquire about the policy Hayes' father had taken out on his son. Angelo was then dug out of his grave 2 days after his burial. And to everyone's surprise, he was still alive. He slipped into a coma. As his body required less oxygen in this state, Angelo managed to survive the ordeal. After a couple of surgeries and rehabilitation, Hayes lived to tell the tale of his live burial. He became a celebrity throughout France and also invented a security coffin complete with a radio transmitter, food locker, library, and chemical toilet, just in case anyone found themselves in his same awful situation.
This is one of the most haunted places in the United Kingdom, Pendle Hill. In the 1600s, a group of women who were living in this area were accused of being witches. And after an extremely unfair trial and being held in a dungeon for months, they were executed. The story of the Pendle witches is infamous, and it actually predates the Salem witch trials. But Pendle Hill is like a paranormal magnet of its own. People have seen everything out here, from demon dogs to shapeshifters, and even aliens and UFOs in the sky. It's rumored that Pendle Hill is one of the most dangerous places to visit after dark due to the high levels of paranormal activity. One specific story from the area that's pretty creepy is that of a headless ghost. Yes, the spirit of a headless woman is seen walking one of these roads at night, and the story goes that she was a local nanny, and multiple children in her care died, so the locals took it upon themselves to take care of the problem and chopped her head off. The story of the Pendle witches is infamous worldwide, and their presence can still be felt today. The full video of our investigation is on my channel now.
Do you know Ryan Seacrest survived a terrifying potential murder attempt? Ryan Seacrest is well known for hosting American TV shows, such as American Idol and American Top 40. He's received Emmy Award nominations and has been extremely successful in his career. However, being in the limelight and being so successful has also garnered him unwanted attention from one particularly dangerous individual. Back in 2009, Ryan was regularly working at the East Studios in Los Angeles. A 26-year-old man named Chidi Azoma Jr. was seen by witnesses entering these studios and prowling the corridors. He actually used to be a soldier, and terrifyingly, he was on the hunt for Ryan Seacrest, carrying a knife. Now, he was known to police from previously attempting to attack Ryan in Orange County. Luckily, Ryan actually had bodyguards at the time, but Chidi ended up attacking one of those. He was finally arrested and sentenced to just 2 years in prison, but was ordered to stay away from Ryan for 10 years.
Streamer, and what he streams is just late night talks with his friends and stuff about sports. One late night stream, bro, out of nowhere in his camera, you just see something move in the background. Moving. I'll show you the video right now, bro.
Fuck.
I don't know. It might be time for him to go as well. You never really know. So I say you just build off of those people.
Look.
Is that a ghost?
Oh, yo, Junebug, chill out. I'm looking at it right now.
I'm gonna go look at it right now because it's what?
The replay on his camera, just his camera alone, bro. Watch.
That's on.
Bro, that's right there, bro.
That's on live. That's on live.
He didn't make that shit, bro.
His friend even reacted to like, "Yo, was that a ghost?"
And he knows something is up, bro, because the fact that he kind of wanted to ignore it and shit, he kind of didn't want to really pay too much attention to it, bro.
Being released from prison, police believe that this man has gone on to do the most evil, disgusting thing you could imagine. Richard Osment was recently released from prison in Texas. He'd been initially sent to jail for burglary after breaking into 5 churches and 2 homes. He served just 10 years of a 40-year sentence and was also a convicted S offender. However, he was released, and far from learning his lesson behind bars, he's actually gone on to do one of the most evil things imaginable. At around 9 a.m. on the 21st of September, Richard's mum noticed he was standing outside her house. She noticed that he was sweating profusely. She walked out the door and tried to push past him, but he wouldn't let her past. She was stunned to then spot a human foot on the floor. She obviously screamed and ran inside, got her husband to ring the police and barricaded them in the property. A huge manhunt began for Richard, who by then had fled the scene. Officers found 38-year-old mum Michaela Brooker injured but alive, and she was taken to a nearby hospital. Tragically though, she did pass away. She'd been attacked with a machete and a concrete block. She sustained serious injuries to her head, which she eventually succumbed to. Later that day, police finally tracked Richard down with helicopters and dogs. He was hiding underwater in a tank. He was arrested, and police are now calling this one of the most horrific, horrible, brutal, senseless attacks that we have seen in a long time.
Minutes after this photo was taken, this woman's husband did the unthinkable. Butterfly Valley in Mugla, Turkey is an incredible popular beauty spot. In June 2018, Hakan Hassal was visiting this spot with his wife, 32-year-old Semra, who are both pictured here. The pair was expecting a child soon, as Semra was 7 months pregnant. The cliff is about 1,000 feet up and many tourists are drawn there by the beautiful views. But little did Semra know she had been lured there for an entirely different reason. Semra was actually afraid of heights, but Hakan convinced her that the trip to the cliff would pay off. Prior to the pair going on this trip, Hakan had actually taken out life insurance for his wife. On the day in question, he lured her to the edge of the cliff to take a selfie. The couple had been up there for about 3 hours and Hakan had been waiting for the exact time to strike. After taking the photo and realizing nobody was watching, he cautiously shoved his pregnant wife off the edge of the cliff, causing her to plummet to her death as well as their unborn child. A witness who was driving by was flagged down by Hakan, who was described as completely calm. The man later stated that I was driving there and I saw someone waving at me and I stopped. Hakan then came over and said that his wife had fallen down the cliff. They then tried to get to the edge of the cliff for a better look, but Hakan did not go down there with them and he was not acting like a man who just lost his wife from falling down a cliff. Photos of the couple were then shared on the news and a tourist came forward to say that they had actually seen the pair too. And they noted that it was odd that the pair was scrambling down the rocky area to get to the very edge. Suspicions then were raised further when Hakan tried to claim an insurance payout after his wife's death. Hakan tried to claim insanity, but he was ordered to serve at least 30 years behind bars. But in my opinion, 30 years for killing 2 people is definitely not enough time. So, after knowing the story behind this photo, tell me how disturbing it really is now.
Have you ever heard of the Boy Lover Network? This is really disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised. So in 2011, international police smashed a dark web website called the Boy Lover Network. Here's a screenshot from the website. When investigators dismantled this website, 230 children were saved. Physically, they had been being held captive by pedophiles and filmed, and that abuse was uploaded online. In total, there were over 70,000 members of this website across the world, and authorities eventually uncovered 670 suspects. One of these suspects that was arrested was a man living in Georgia named Joseph Giddings. Now, I don't know why there aren't any photographs of the pedophiles involved in this anywhere online. If it was me, I would be blasting these creeps' photos out to the world. But let's talk about Joseph. Joseph, who went by the name Joe Cool on this CP website, was a senior member and moderator, meaning he had a lot of power over these pedophiles. And eventually an undercover officer contacted Joseph, and Joseph provided him with 2 DVDs full of the most graphic, vile CP CSAM you can possibly imagine. But Joseph only received 11 years in prison. And this happened in 2011, which means that Joseph is out in the free world again today. For victimizing thousands of children and being a part of one of the biggest pedophile rings on planet Earth, he got 11 years in prison. And although some arrests were made, I believe they arrested people in 30 different countries, they barely even carved out a chunk of the 70,000 pedophiles that were active on that website. That means that there are thousands, dozens of thousands of pedophiles that are out there in the world that were never caught, never exposed. They could be your friends, they could be your family, your boss, your coworker, your doctor. Yeah, I forgot to mention there were doctors, police officers, and teachers involved in this thing too. These people are everywhere. And in my mind, the only thing that I can do here is to help raise awareness and keep people talking about these things so they aren't forgotten. So we can hopefully put some pressure on government officials and people to actually do something about this shit. If you want to join me on my journey to expose pedophile rings, and you want to learn about the terrible things our own government does to promote people like that, listen to my podcast, The Conspiracy Files. It's available on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We do super deep dives on subjects like this. Or you can watch the video version here. If you haven't seen this video, this will enlighten you and show you that the governments are involved with these things.
Recently came across a video that went viral. A guy who kept having sleep paralysis in the middle of the night. It would be 3 a.m. and for some reason he would always get sleep paralysis at this time. So he ended up setting up a camera, and it wasn't just a regular camera, it was a thermal camera, and he caught
something while he was having sleep paralysis?
Exactly, yes. Watch.
Shut the fuck up, bro. What the fuck?
Look. You can see the orbs too.
Yeah.
Look, he gets up. So now, I ended up getting sleep paralysis for the very first time.
This motherfucker.
So at first, it didn't hit me that I had sleep paralysis, but you know when you wake up and you just did mad physical activity, like you feel like ass, bro.
Yeah.
But then I was trying to turn to get my water, and I was facing this way, so I was trying to turn that way, and then I couldn't move. And then see at the corner of my eye, bro, somebody standing there. I'm thinking like, yo, low-key is you or like somebody trying to fuck with me and shit. And I try to say, bro, stop fucking with me right now, but I couldn't say it. And then like slowly
felt the presence like get closer to you, right?
Like, and I kind of snapped out of it, and I eventually like got my strength, even though I was mad sore. I got my strength to turn around. I was super sweaty, bro.
These are pictures with the most horrifying backstories, part 1. This is Molly LaRue and Geoff Hood, and they are getting their photo taken before hiking the Appalachian Trail. And this was the last photo taken of the couple before they were murdered on Cove Mountain by a wanted drifter named Paul David Cruz. These two just looked so happy and excited to start their journey on this hike, but instead it ended in something they never would have expected in a million years. Next is a picture of Russian freerunner Pavel Kashin doing a backflip off the edge of a 16-story building. Pavel decided to stand on a ledge that was just 3 feet wide on a rooftop that was 16 floors above the ground. His friends Vladimir and Sasha were filming the stunt. After doing the backflip, Pavel struggled with the landing, losing his footing and falling from the roof to his death on the ground below. This picture is just very disturbing to me because Pavel has no idea that right when he finishes this backflip, he is going to fall 16 stories to his death. Next is a picture of a father posing with his daughter at graduation. However, this father isn't a normal father. This is Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK Killer. And at the time this photo was taken, he had killed 10 people over the span of 25 years. And he only stopped killing to raise his daughter, who is pictured here. The BTK Killer's story goes very deep, and in my opinion, he's definitely one of the most interesting serial killers ever. Next is a photo that all of you may be way too familiar with. This is the last known image of pregnant Shannon Watts. And just a few hours later, she as well as her 2 daughters, who were aged 3 and 4, would be dead, murdered by her husband and their father, Chris Watts. Also, he could start a new life with a woman he was cheating on her with. I've made many videos about this case, and it's one of those cases that will always stick with you after you're done reading it. Shannon Watts had no idea this would be the last time she would ever walk into her house and see her daughters. May she and those 2 young girls rest in peace.
Would you do if your friend murdered their mum and then invited you round to see the corpse? Have you ever seen a dead body? 14-year-old Carly asked her friend in Mississippi in March 2024. Carly Gregg lived at home with her mum, high school teacher Ashley Smiley. It was the 19th of March and Carly and her mum's relationship had become strained. Her mum had discovered she'd been using substances and had a lot of burner phones. Now, her mum was obviously very worried about this and was looking into it further. Carly, meanwhile, was apparently struggling with her mental health. She had an ED and was apparently hearing voices and had been put on medication. It's believed that Ashley had been searching her daughter's room when Carly crept in holding a gun behind her back. CCTV captured the audio from when Carly went into the room and then shot her mum 3 times. Her mum's screams could be heard and then all fell silent. The 40-year-old was killed from a gunshot wound to the face. Carly then took out her mum's phone and texted her stepdad pretending to be her mum. She typed, "When will you be home, honey?" She then texted one of her friends telling her to come over because there was an emergency. When the anonymous friend arrived, Carly asked her if she'd ever seen a dead body. It's believed she then showed her friend her mum's dead body and told her her stepdad was next. Her stepdad did actually return home shortly after, and Carly pulled out the weapon on him too. Luckily, he was able to overpower the teen and was shot in the shoulder, which was not fatal. In a harrowing recollection of the incident, her stepdad stated that he'd found his wife deceased. He also said the following: "She was laying on her back with her arms over here and a towel covering her face. I knew that she'd been shot. There was blood around, I'm not sure exactly where, on the right side of her face. When I opened the door to the kitchen, the gun went off in my face before the door was 3 or 4 inches wide open. The gun flashed in my face. It went off 2 more times, but my hand was on the gun after the first shot and I twisted it from Carly." Although a psychiatrist testified that Carly was in a mental health crisis, a jury at her trial found her guilty of killing her mum and trying to kill her stepdad. The now 15-year-old has been given life in prison with no chance of parole.
This is one of the craziest and most gruesome true crime cases that I've ever heard of. This is 32-year-old Justin Moan, and on January 30th, he killed and decapitated his dad. And after, he posted a video on YouTube holding up the severed head.
This is the head of Mike Moan, a federal employee of over 20 years, and my father. He is now in hell for eternity as a traitor to his country.
This case started on the evening of January 30th at around 7 p.m. when police were called to a home in Middletown Township, Pennsylvania. The home belonged to Michael and Denise Moan, who also lived with their son Justin. That night, Denise found Michael in their bathroom surrounded by a pool of blood, and it was clear that he had been decapitated. Denise then discovered Michael's severed head wrapped in saran wrap in a cooking pot in the next bedroom. It was around this time that multiple calls to police started pouring in about an extremely graphic video that had been posted to YouTube earlier that night called Moan's Militia. The video was over 14 minutes long, and it was of Justin holding up his dad's severed head. He then stated his dad's full name, saying that he was in hell for being a traitor to his country. Michael was a federal employee. He was an engineer with the Geoenvironmental section of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The video was a call to arms for American patriots and was him rallying against the government. In the video, he encouraged patriots to kill federal employees, and he ordered that all federal law enforcement officers, judges, and Border Patrol agents be captured and tortured for information, and then be publicly executed. Obviously, after the 911 calls and the gruesome crime scene, police began searching for Justin, who was on the run in his dad's white Toyota Corolla. After pinging his phone, Justin was found at a National Guard training center over 100 miles away. He had already driven through barricades and climbed a barbed wire fence, but they were able to locate and arrest him. Upon arrest, Justin stated that he wanted to join forces with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. He has since been charged with first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. According to an autopsy conducted on Michael, he died of a gunshot wound to the head before being dismembered with a knife and a machete that Justin had bought just one day before the murder. Both of those murder weapons were found in the home's bathtub, as well as bloody gloves in the bedroom matching to what Justin wore in his YouTube video. While Justin reportedly showed no previous signs of any issues that could have indicated that this was to come, he did have a string of unfounded lawsuits against the US government as well as his previous employer. And he was also known to write some pretty out there books, like this one titled The Revolution Leader's Survival Guide, where he writes a letter to Donald Trump, warning him of a peaceful revolution led by him if positive change didn't come to America and the world soon. I don't even have the words. This case is beyond horrific. This is Rachel Morin. She was murdered 6 months ago while running alone on a popular hiking trail. Her murder is still unsolved, but police just released these new sketches of her killer. Everyone needs to know her story because this person could very well strike again. On August 5th of last year, Rachel left her home to go on a run at the Ma and Pa Heritage Trail in Bel Air, Maryland. It was a trail that she was known to hike, but that night she never returned home. Her boyfriend ended up reporting her missing at around 11:20 that night after not being able to contact her, and within hours, her car was found parked at the trailhead. The next day, someone searching for Rachel called 911 to report a body that was found near the Ma and Pa Trail, and when authorities arrived, they confirmed that it was Rachel. Not a lot of detail has been released about her cause of death, but police did say that it was clear that she'd been a victim of a violent homicide, and they suspected that she was attacked on the trail and then pulled through a wooded area before being killed in a drainage culvert. Authorities combed through hours of video footage from in and around the trail in hopes of quickly finding her killer, but they came up empty-handed. Then the focus turned to her boyfriend, who does have a criminal history, and he was kind of thrusted into the spotlight. But what the public didn't know was that authorities were able to pull DNA from the crime scene, where they were then able to run it through a national database. And not only did it not match Rachel's boyfriend, it actually matched and was linked back to a man who assaulted a young girl in Los Angeles during a home invasion on March 26th. Although the link did not provide the killer's name, investigators were able to review the home invasion and found that the man responsible for both crimes was actually caught on the home's security footage. The man entered the LA home possibly through a window and assaulted many members of the family, including a young girl, and he was eventually scared off. He was then seen leaving the home through the front door on security footage. Police believe that had he not been scared off by another family member, that this case would have likely ended similar to Rachel's. DNA left behind on a hat at the California home was confirmed to match DNA that was left behind in Rachel's murder. And with the help of witnesses on the trail that night, as well as the family members of the home invasion, police were able to put together this new sketch of Rachel's killer. He's believed to be around 5'9", between 20 to 30 years old, roughly 160 pounds, and has dark hair. Authorities are concerned that whoever did this could possibly be a serial killer who was escalating and could possibly kill again. At this point, it's not clear if Rachel was targeted, as she did frequent the trail, or if her killer just randomly stumbled across her that night. But one thing police do know is that the killer was likely very familiar with the area, and they believe that he'd been in the area for possibly even weeks leading up to the murder. Sheriff Jeff Gaylor said that his gut tells him that Rachel was stalked, but he also said that they can't rule out the possibility that this was a crime of opportunity. It's now been 6 months, and Rachel's murder is still unsolved. Ma and Pa Heritage Trail is somewhat popular, and it starts behind some businesses that are always pretty busy, including a brewery and a Domino's Pizza. It's also entangled in a neighborhood, so this area is never that desolate. Someone has to know something. Right now, there's a $35,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. If you have any information about the murder of Rachel Morin, please contact the email on the screen.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew, Part 2. In its natural habitat, a blowfish isn't actually ugly. This is one 3,000 feet below sea level. But this is one after extreme tissue damage after being pulled up rapidly by a fisherman. Men who are hanged get what is called a death erection, which I'm assuming is pretty awkward for the family. There's a parasite that enters a fish's mouth, eats the tongue, and replaces itself as the new tongue. Blue-eyed people are statistically more likely to suffer from depression and alcoholism. Sometimes an Amber Alert causes the kidnapper to panic and kill the child immediately. Every year you live through the future anniversary of your death. CNN has a pre-recorded broadcast for the end of the world. A man and his wife had just moved into a new house a couple miles away from their previous home. One night while the wife was away, the husband saw a figure approaching the front porch. It was a tall, middle-aged man with a menacing smile. He introduced himself as Damon and welcomed the man to the neighborhood. Damon then asked him if he had a shovel or a spade, because he was starting a garden and didn't have the necessary tools. The man thought it was a little late for that, but he didn't want to seem rude, so he got out his shovel and offered to help. They both dug for several hours, when eventually the man asked Damon why they were digging so deep. It was at this moment that Damon took a rag out of his pocket and held it against the man's face. He attempted to fight back, but eventually he began to slip out of consciousness. The last thing he heard was, "Shh, go to sleep." He later woke up in a tight confined space. He then realized that he had been digging his own grave.
May 20th, 1947, the body of 22-year-old Christina Kettlewell was found 150 feet away from her honeymoon cottage. Her remains were found in just 9 inches of water on the banks of a river in Severn Falls, Ontario. 8 days prior, Christina had eloped with 26-year-old war veteran Jack Kettlewell. Jack had a friend named Ronald Barry who strangely joined them on their honeymoon. During this time, it was reported that Christina started to act out of character. She seemed dazed, would go into crying fits, and questioned Jack's love for her. On May 20th, Christina disappeared and Ronald's cabin mysteriously caught on fire. Ronald allegedly returned to the cabin to find a disoriented Jack with a head injury and pulled him out of the flames, but Christina couldn't be found. Christina's body was free from burns and an autopsy found traces of codeine in her stomach, but her death was declared a drowning. Jack claimed to not remember anything past 11 a.m. that day. The police report claimed that there were signs and evidence that Christina was very upset by the unnatural conduct of her husband and Ronald. And despite possible theories, including that Christina took her own life, the case remains unsolved.
A man was stabbed after helping a man who had broken down on the side of the road. A kind man from Missouri named Dr. Patton stopped his car on September 29th. He had noticed there was a stranger in need of his help. The man in need of help was 28-year-old Tyler Risler. He had approached Doctor and asked him for a lift. He told him his car had broken down and he needed a ride back to Target. Happy to do the good deed, Doctor obliged and gave him a lift. However, when the pair started driving down the road, Tyler reportedly started acting odd. He decided at first to change the direction of where they were going and then tried to take control of the car. He allegedly began threatening Doctor with a knife. Thinking quickly, Doctor decided to take the key out of the ignition and try and slow the car down. He tried desperately to get out of the car, but Tyler stabbed him in the chest. Luckily, he ran to a neighbour's house and the neighbour chased Tyler away with a shovel. The man was rushed to hospital and survived the attack, luckily. Meanwhile, Tyler jumped the fence of somebody's garden and threatened a woman and her 2 children. He allegedly stole their car and then was involved in a crash. Thankfully, Tyler was caught and arrested. He has a history of offences, including assault on a law enforcement officer and robbery.
This is everything you should know about the mass shooting that just happened. Last night at 7 p.m. in the city of Lewiston, Maine, a man walked into a bowling alley called Just in Time and began shooting. The suspect, who we now know is 40-year-old Robert Card, drove from the bowling alley to the bar, which was 4 miles away, and began shooting again. At this point, there's 18 people deceased and 13 others were injured. Robert is still on the run, and police have advised everyone in the city to be careful and stay home. Now, what do we know about Robert Card? Robert's enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserve and has an active military ID. He's also been recognized a number of times with awards and medals while serving. But something that I should know is that back in July, the commanders in the Army Reserve were extremely concerned with Robert because he was just behaving erratic. They called police and he was evaluated and then put into a mental health facility for 2 weeks because he said that he was hearing voices in his head that was telling him to shoot up the military base. Which, I'm no specialist or anything, but 2 weeks in a mental health facility to help someone who's having these kind of thoughts, I don't think that's enough time. What's absolutely devastating is that one of the victims last night who worked at the bar was fatally shot when he tried to attack the shooter with a knife. Robert's family has been working with police and investigators to find Robert, and they've asked him to surrender.
This is by far one of the worst murders in American history. This is the Watts family, and in the early hours of August 13th, 2018, Christopher Lee Watts murdered his pregnant wife Shannon by strangulation, and right after this he murdered his 2 young daughters who are 4 and 3 by smothering them with a pillow, all while they begged their dad not to kill them. He then buried Shannon in a shallow grave near an oil storage facility, and he then dumped his 2 children's dead bodies into an oil tank. Christopher Watts initially maintained his innocence in his family's disappearance, but was arrested on August 15th after confessing in an interview with detectives to murdering Shannon, and he then later admitted to murdering his children. He did this because he wanted to run away and start a new life with a girl he was cheating on his wife with. And he thought the solution to this was to kill his entire family. There's also this clip of him being interviewed by some news outlet, and in the video he's begging for his wife and children to come back. Now at this point, nobody has any clue that he killed them, but he does. He remembers exactly what happened, he knows that they're dead, he knows how he killed them, and he's still on live TV begging them to come home, saying he can't live without them. Just watch this clip, it's absolutely sickening.
My last question, if you have any of those, feel free to step in. My last question, if your wife can see this, if she can watch this, what would you like to tell your wife and your kids?
Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like, if somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring her back.
That's it. I can take that mic off.
Did you know about the Club Penguin dark criminal network? Born in 2005, Club Penguin was a massively multiplayer online game involving a frozen virtual world. Fans of the game will know that it included loads of online games and activities. However, when the site shut down in 2017, it broke the hearts of many Club Penguin fans. The site made its money off paid memberships, but due to the site's declining popularity, not enough revenue was being generated. This spurred on fans to create unofficial websites all across the world. These were extremely popular when COVID hit and boredom was at an all-time high, with many people quarantining. People looked to these nostalgic websites as a way to pass the time. The largest of these was called Club Penguin Online. However, what was going on behind the scenes was dark and criminal. Bearing in mind that the original demographic of Club Penguin was ages 6 to 12. The copies of the website were still branded as child-friendly, but they were actually anything but. The activity that was going on was shocking, and Disney, the original creators of Club Penguin, actually stated that what was going on was abhorrent and illegal. The official Club Penguin was closely watched and moderated to maintain child safety. The unofficial versions of Club Penguin, however, were definitely not a safe space for children. Conversations relating to substances, racism, users being toxic and bullying each other, and even having conversations about S. It was a hive of online predators asking children inappropriate questions and asking them to join private online servers. There also grew a huge rivalry between people who were creating different versions of the Club Penguin website. It got so bad that individuals were getting hackers involved, threatening people, and even exposing their private details online. Shockingly, a British man who was heavily involved in the Club Penguin online website was actually ultimately arrested over allegations of child P. This is the UK's most famous missing boy. In September 2007, Andrew Gosden was just 14 years old. He was a very intelligent boy and was top of his class in most classes at school. He was an introvert that usually spent most of his time at home. The day before Andrew went missing seemed completely normal. He went to school, he had some tea, and then he watched some TV. However, on September the 14th, he seemed more irritable than normal. Instead of getting the bus to school that morning like his parents thought he was, he went to a cash point and withdrew £200. CCTV then captures him walking home, where he changed his clothes into a Slipknot t-shirt. When he left the house, he didn't take his charger with him, and he also didn't take £100 that he'd saved up. He didn't take his passport, but he did take his house key, which indicates he was going to come home. He bought a one-way ticket to London and was last seen leaving King's Cross station at about 11:30. Frustratingly, the school had actually tried to contact Andrew's parents to say that he hadn't turned up to school that day, but they dialed the wrong number and left an answer phone message on the wrong phone. His family was completely cleared of any suspicion, and the family and the school and all of the students went to London and they were handing out loads of flyers. Weirdly, a year after this incident, a man came to a police station to say that he had information about Andrew. Now, the police station was unmanned, so the person spoke to this man just over an intercom system and sent a police officer down there. Mysteriously, by the time the police officer arrived, the person had vanished. This is what Andrew might look like now, just being the age that he may be if he's still alive. Theories about this case is that he may have gone to London to meet up with someone or go to a concert. Was he lured there by somebody with bad intentions, or was he just going there for the day, gonna come back, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody did something bad to him? In 2009, the family paid for a search of the River Thames to try and find some sort of closure. The search did find a body, but it wasn't Andrew's. The most up-to-date information that we have on this case is that 2 men were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, but they've actually been released.
A killer has now been identified in the brutal slayings of siblings Karen and Gordon Alexander. They were killed over 4 decades ago, and police now believe the killer was their own father. Sadly, he'll never face a judge and jury for the murders of his children, as he passed away in 2014. He literally got away with murder. Weldon Alexander called emergency services on the morning of April 8, 1981, to say that he'd just got home to find his 13-year-old son dead on the kitchen floor, and his 14-year-old daughter in her bed barely breathing, with a butter knife sticking out of her chest. He said that he'd pulled the knife out of her chest and called an ambulance. She was rushed to hospital, but sadly she could not survive her injuries. Both Karen and Gordon had been stabbed multiple times. Detectives examined evidence, identified witnesses, and followed multiple leads, but there was no DNA testing back then, and the case soon went cold. Sadly, Karen and Gordon's mother Nancy was in hospital at the time of the murders, and tragically she took her own life just 3 years after their deaths, and Weldon simply went on with his life. There was one patrol officer who never gave up on this case. Calvin Seward, despite being retired, was given permission last year to reopen the case in Arkansas. Over the last 18 months, he's re-interviewed dozens of people and sent off forensic evidence for analysis. And finally, a killer has been revealed. Bodily fluids found on Karen's bedding were matched to that of the DNA of her father, Weldon. Sickeningly, she was raped shortly before her murder, and police now believe that her brother Gordon had heard Karen fighting off Weldon, and he'd come to try and protect his sister, and he paid with his life. Weldon had then stabbed Karen multiple times and then left for work. He'd then returned the next morning and called police saying that there'd been a break-in and his children had been stabbed. It's just a shame Weldon Alexander is no longer alive to face up to his crimes. Had he been alive now, he'd be facing life in prison for 2 counts of capital murder.
This rapper murdered his roommate and ate her face. I'm not kidding, this is a really disturbing story, so viewer discretion is advised. So this is Anton Singleton, aka Big Lurch. He was born in 1976 in Dallas, Texas, and he started as an underground horrorcore rapper. So Big Lurch's rap career started with the group Cosmic Slop Shop. This is them. They released one album in the late 90s, and then the group disbanded. But Big Lurch had dreams of making it big, so he started pursuing a solo career. And things seemed to be really going up for him in his life. That is, until the day of April 10th, 2002. On that day, something snapped in Anton. At the time, he was living in an apartment with a woman named Tanisha and her boyfriend. And at some point during that day, Big Lurch murdered her. So when a friend eventually discovered Tanisha's body, they found that her chest had literally been ripped open. And there was a 3-inch blade lodged and broken off in her scapula. Upon further examination, teeth marks were actually found on her face, and teeth marks were also found on her lungs, which had been ripped out of her body and placed somewhere else in the apartment. So when this friend discovered Tanisha's body, they also discovered Big Lurch standing outside naked in the street, staring up at the sky, covered head to toe in blood. Obviously, he was arrested, but what they found afterwards made the story even more disturbing, if that's possible. When an analysis was done on Big Lurch's stomach contents directly after the murder, they found human flesh inside of his stomach. This meant that he had murdered Tanisha and actually ate her. I mean, this was just a horrific crime scene for investigators to process. So Anton was eventually sentenced to life in prison. The defense argued that he had smoked PCP the night before the murder and was in a state of psychosis. But since drug use cannot be the grounds for an insanity plea in California, he was still given the life sentence in prison. And eerily, this is just a really, really eerie coincidence. On his album cover, you can see him holding a plate with a human skull on it. This definitely seemed like a very bad omen of things to come in Big Lurch's life.
This is the ISIS child executioner video, one of the most sickening videos ever explained. Before I begin, this is a massive trigger warning. The video begins with the victim tied to some sort of fence with his arms up. He is inside of a ball pit, and then you see a child walk across the abandoned ball pit. And I mean child, this kid is no more than 6 years old. Which is just mind-blowing. The child then stands next to an adult supervisor, and the adult then pulls out a pistol and cocks it and hands it to the child. The child then aims the gun at the victim's head and pulls the trigger, hitting him in the head. The first shot doesn't instantly kill the victim. You see blood leak out of his head and you see his eyes move around. The child then shoots the victim 3 to 4 more times, and at this point, the victim is dead. After this, the child raises the gun in the air and chants. The video then jumps to another execution, and it opens up with a young teenager holding up a knife. He then reads out a speech, and the video then skips to the execution, which is being done by the boy who just read the speech. The video briefly shows the victim. He has his hands tied behind his back and he's on his knees. The child executioner then kicks him on the back and he falls to the ground. The video then shows the toddler who did the prior shooting execution doing a cutthroat gesture. The teenage executioner then slits the throat of the victim, and as this is happening, there are various close-ups of the victim on the ground bleeding out and grimacing in pain. You can literally see the life leave his body, and like most ISIS executions, there is music playing over this. But you can briefly hear the victim making noises and the child slitting the throat. One thing I want to say is that these ISIS execution videos are shot in extremely high quality, unlike the Mexican cartel videos, which makes them very clear and disturbing. You almost have to remind yourself that it's real people because it literally is movie quality. This is by far the worst ISIS video out there, and not because of the gruesome nature, but because the killers are literally kids. The kid on the screen right now who did the shooting execution is literally a 6-year-old boy. I can't imagine the brainwashing these kids went through that ISIS done to them. And whatever you do, please never go searching for this video.
This is Christopher Westbrook, a TikTok famous chef that was always making recipes and dinner for the sorority house he worked at. Now, people online really seemed to like Christopher. He seemed like this fun-loving chef who cared a lot about the food he was making for these young women. But nobody would have ever seen what was coming next. In August of this year, Christopher was arrested for the possession of CP, meaning he's a hardcore pedophile. And in total, he was charged with possessing, distributing, and viewing CP materials. But this story only gets more and more disturbing. So once authorities got a search warrant for Christopher's belongings, they entered his house and they recovered a laptop and a hard drive. And what they found on that hard drive was nothing short of absolutely disturbing. They found over 700 images of children being abused. Yes, more than 700 images of CP were found on his devices. That is a lot. And to think that before this arrest, he actually had 150,000 followers here on this platform. That's a really big amount of followers, and he could have turned this into some sort of a career. That is, if he didn't make such a terrible, disgusting, deplorable decision. This all started in June of 2021 when the Center for Missing and Exploited Children alerted local authorities saying that there were some explicit images involving children being uploaded to an account on Google owned by this guy. And thankfully authorities were able to sweep in, take this guy into custody, and get him off the streets. Now, a lot of people were actually really pissed at Christopher because just a week or so before he was arrested, he got on TikTok and was begging people for money.
This isn't a video that I want to make, I promise. But as most of you know, I work at a college.
So yeah, he was asking people for donations. I know a number of people donated quite a significant amount of money to this guy. And I don't know if the process has been started to get people refunds or what's going on with that, but I mean, I can't imagine the feeling of those people who donated thinking they were helping this lovable guy out, when in reality they were donating to a hardcore, disturbed pedophile. Just goes to show once again that you can't really trust anybody on this app.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Okay, this one's a little bit crazy. This is Kevin and Ruby Frank and their 6 children, and they basically rose to fame with their YouTube channel that documented their life. Ruby's now been arrested just 2 days ago on suspicion of child abuse. The family are from Springville in Utah, and they are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as the Mormon community. Their YouTube channel called 8 Passengers was launched in January 2015, and within 18 months they'd reached 1 million followers. And Ruby said that the channel was created as a way to feel present and to just enjoy being with the kids as they are right now. However, as their channel grew, viewers became a bit concerned about their parenting style, even describing them as cruel. In 2020, their son Chad actually had his bedroom taken away and was forced to sleep on a beanbag on the floor after playing pranks on his little brother. Other YouTubers then began looking at their past content and found some quite disturbing things. There was one video where 6-year-old Eve had forgotten to pick her own packed lunch up off the countertop, and Ruby refused to take it into school for her, saying it was her own fault. She wouldn't give the kids their breakfast until they'd done their chores, and she said that none of them deserved personal space. She would also regularly withhold meals when the kids were play fighting, just as normal kids do. There was then a petition set up for CPS to step in by people saying that they were profiting off their children and putting themselves first. Ruby and Kevin pushed back at this, saying that people were just trying to stir up drama and take clips out of context, and they said that they were giving their children choices and teaching them consequences of their actions. They continued to upload videos, becoming more sporadic and then eventually stopping, and in mid-2023 the YouTube channel was actually removed. In January 2022, Ruby announced that she was joining a new YouTube channel called Connections with a woman named Jodie Hildebrandt. Jodie is a therapist, but she actually had her license put on probation back in 2012. The punishment was actually for discussing a client's porn addiction at her Mormon church without his permission. This new channel caused concern with viewers straight away. Jodie actually said that women who were raped had a choice, and Ruby claimed that children don't deserve privacy or unconditional love. It wasn't long before Ruby's family began to break apart. Her oldest daughter, Shari, moved out in September 2022 and said that she does not support the extreme beliefs of their YouTube channel. Her eldest son, Chad, is also thought to have left the family home. It's unclear whether Kevin is still a part of the family, but it's been reported that he has left his job. And just 2 days ago, both Jodie and Ruby were arrested. Shockingly, the arrest came after reports of a malnourished child with open wounds and duct tape around their extremities asking for food. An unknown caller said that this child was asking for food and water, and it was that bad that they were taken to hospital. The police then searched Ruby Frank's home. Another malnourished child was found, and a further 4 children have been taken into care. These 2 women are now in police custody, and Ruby's sister actually posted saying it was about time and that at least the kids are now safe. Obviously, there's currently no outcome for this case because they did just get arrested 2 days ago, but it sounds to me like they've got very extremist views and they've maybe been abusing their own children for a while, and I'm glad that they've been found out and hopefully they get a lengthy sentence.
This is the crazy story of where the term Stockholm Syndrome came from. In Stockholm in 1973, an escaped convict walks into a bank and holds 4 bank workers hostage. Escaped convict Jan Erik Olsson also wounds a policeman who responded to a silent alarm, and snipers quickly surround the building. The criminal made several demands, including a car and also the arrival of a fellow convict. The police actually fulfilled his wishes, apart from one. He wanted to leave and take his hostages with him. The 2 criminals and the bank worker remain locked in a vault. Inside the vault, something really weird was happening. The bank workers were forming a really bizarre bond with the captors and actually started fearing the police more than their own abductors. They even stayed loyal when they were being threatened with physical harm. One of the criminals wanted to shoot one of the bank workers in the leg to get a reaction from the police. Upon hearing this, one of the bank workers actually claimed that they thought it was so kind that they only wanted to injure them in the leg. In another bizarre twist, the hostages even offered to act as human shields to prevent their captors getting injured. When police eventually pumped tear gas into the building to force them out, the captors even begged police not to hurt their abductors. Finally, when the criminals were sent back to prison, the hostages even went to visit them. This is how an affair actually helped to solve a murder case. Teresa Scalf was 29 years old and working as a nurse when she was brutally killed. It was 1986 and she was living in Lakeland in Florida. Her mum Betty had begun to get really concerned when her daughter hadn't turned up for work. She ended up going round to her daughter's house and finding an absolutely disgusting scene. Teresa had been brutally killed and had her throat cut. Tragically, the nurse also had an 8-year-old son who was left without a mother. Luckily, he hadn't been at home at the time of the killing. Teresa's murder actually went unsolved for decades, almost 37 years. Now, the killing was believed to have been S-motivated, and although they had no concrete suspects, family said that she had actually mentioned having a stalkerish neighbour. The neighbour was Donald Douglas, and he was actually questioned by police, but frustratingly they couldn't find any concrete evidence to suggest he was involved. However, due to an illicit affair, he has now been identified as her killer. Police were able to identify him as the murderer through DNA of a child from an affair within the family. Using blood samples that they had from the scene, they were able to match DNA to that of Donald's son. Now, although it's not exactly clear who had the affair with who, WFLA reports that it was an affair involving Donald's 3rd cousin who had a child. Frustratingly, Donald is actually now deceased, having passed away in 2008. His son is apparently in shock at having a murderer for a dad. You will not believe this insane plot twist. In 2008, Carolyn Watson and Julian Butchwald were a young religious couple. They were living in Melbourne, Australia, and had been together around 2 years. Julian was driving the pair to a picnic date in the car, but he actually stopped the car suddenly, noticing an animal on the side of the road. Suddenly, something horrific happened. Carolyn's vision went completely black after being blindfolded by a terrifying masked man. All she could work out was she was being stripped off and thrown into a vehicle. The car finally stopped and she took her blindfold off, and she was really relieved to see that her boyfriend was by her side. He He'd also been stripped off, and the couple were completely in the middle of nowhere. The pair managed to untie themselves, but were having to just wander around aimlessly for a week, trying to find safety. Meanwhile, police were desperately searching for the couple. Family and friends were really concerned, and they knew how out of character this was for the pair to go missing. They sent out air and water search teams, but just couldn't locate the couple. As the missing pair were very religious, they'd actually vowed to be celibate until marriage, but Julian started to suggest that it might be a good idea to break this celibacy in order to keep them warm. Finally, a local farmer found the couple and alerted police. However, they quickly found that the story didn't really add up. Julian soon confessed to police that he'd actually made the whole thing up and he'd staged the kidnapping. His motive was purely to try and get his girlfriend to break their vow of celibacy. Some are calling this the most horrific fraternity hazing ever in the United States. This is how one night at university can destroy your life forever. Danny Santulli was 18 years old and a freshman at the Uni of Missouri. In October 2021, Danny was captured on CCTV being blindfolded and led downstairs in an event named Pledge Dad Reveal Night. Danny was made to drink a litre of straight vodka by himself. At around 10:55, Danny collapsed and some of the frat members were seen carrying him to a sofa. Around midnight, Danny was captured on cameras sliding off the sofa, and shortly after he was found unconscious with blue lips. Shockingly, instead of calling an ambulance for Danny, the frat members piled him into a car, dropping him on the way. They drove him to hospital, but at this point he was already in cardiac arrest. Danny had to be resuscitated and spent the next 6 weeks in intensive care. Prior to this evening, Danny had been left needing stitches and crutches after he'd been forced to climb inside of a bin with broken glass inside. 2 nights before the night in question, Danny broke down in tears on the phone to his sister and told her about how stressed he felt about it all. His family had begged him to quit the pledge, but he didn't want to be ridiculed. This is Danny now. He will need full-time care for the rest of his life. He's now severely brain damaged, is blind, and cannot walk or talk. 2 former students are set to go to trial over this case.